لا يزال الخير حيا لا يزال إن في الدنيا سلاما وظلال أخبر الأيام أنها في وصال قم بنا وانظر لآيات.
I'd like to touch upon Cage a bit, because you're an outreach director. You spoke of Prevent, obviously, and I know on the website it's quite apparent Prevent is basically taking kids away and children away from their families.
Yeah.
And you've given me examples, etc., etc. How did it come about, Cage? Because I know it was established in 2003, but at the time you were in Bagram.
I was a bit tied up at the time.
You were a bit tied up, yeah.
So people say, he's the founder of Cage. I'm not the founder of Cage. I couldn't have been, and the American military was involved with us as well.
Okay.
So that is the point. The point of Cage was, at the time known as Cage Prisoners, campaigning for documenting, highlighting exclusively the prisoners held in Guantánamo without charge or trial. So there were, at the height, a total of 779 prisoners being held there.
Right.
The largest demographic comes from Yemen, and prior to that, Saudi Arabia. So the largest numbers of prisoners were Saudis and Yemenis, and then followed by other nationalities. Out of the British, there were about 15.
Okay.
And over a period of years, we were released and returned home. We fought a case, or myself, I fought a case against the British government, and we won a settlement in our favour for complicity in torture against us.
Right.
So now, what's really important about this is that this has been going on now hand in hand with the war on terror, Guantánamo. And so recently, you may have heard that Donald Trump said he signed an order to keep Guantánamo open. Obama, prior to that,
Obama promised before he came into office he wanted to close immediately.
So America's bipolar when it comes to this.
Yeah.
Literally. But the interesting thing is that from then till now, when America was denying torture, etc., and now so much has come out about involvement in torture, you have a president in the United States of America, the most powerful man in the world, who says that I would torture works. I would waterboard, which is a medieval waterboarding torture technique, again, and a lot more, and I will fill up Guantánamo. So he's just pressed the reset button on everything. And what that has done has told anybody who's under any illusion that America may purport to be a bastion of human rights, freedom, democracy, etc., etc. When push comes to shove, this is what it's about. And
it's an empire.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing for most people to get. And most people, when I talk to them about it, is that they just can't get their heads around it.
Right.
So it challenges. Britain is very, very close to America. America does something, Britain does it alongside. So when you tell the ordinary person, they get shocked. It's very hard to find somebody who justifies Guantánamo in the UK.
What is Cage very similar to Amnesty International? In the work that it does.
We, in the past, worked very, very closely with Amnesty, more so with Reprieve later, which is an organisation that started off in America on the death penalty, but now represents the majority of Guantánamo prisoners. But no, we're not like Amnesty. We are very clear on we say clearly where our principles and our ethos is an Islamic one. We are non-sectarian. We will represent anybody who's been targeted under what we believe is our remit, which is the war on terror.
Right.
So by definition, that means you're going to be a Muslim.
By definition,
yeah. So in that regard, it began with Guantánamo, secret detention sites, torture, and all of the kind of stuff that seems out of this world, or sounds like it's out of movies and books, until it came home here. And anti-terror legislation started being applied here. There have been 15 laws almost passed in 18 years that in a de facto term only apply to Muslims.
Right.
So whether it's the Glorification of Terrorism Act, where people are sent to prison here in the UK, the land of Shakespeare, are sent to prison for writing poetry. We've got cases of people gone to prison.
Okay.
Samina Malik, known as the lyrical terrorist, she writes some, I think, not very good poetry, where she glorifies mujahideen and so forth, etc. But it's poetry, it's words. And she goes to prison for 10 months for glorifying terrorism. We have...
So she wrote a poem.
She wrote a poem, she went to prison.
And she went to prison.
She went to prison, yeah. She's known
glorifying
as...
terrorism.
Glorifying terrorism, yeah. Her name...
How old was she at the time?
I think about 22.
Right.
Yeah. Eventually, I think her conviction was quashed, but not after she spent 10 months in prison.
It's ridiculous.
So, and I said, this is the land of Shakespeare and freedom of expression.
Shakespeare and Wordsworth,
Yeah. So from that to the Prevent program, we've got people under house arrest in the UK still to this day. Most people don't know about it, and we think of house arrest. We think of perhaps Aung San Suu Kyi back in Burma when she was deserving of her Nobel Prize.
And she was deserving of the time.
Yeah. But in Britain there are several cases of people literally under house arrest, even as we speak, based on anti-terror legislation and based on secret evidence that they cannot challenge, that they can't see.
But this is what I was going to say, because a lot of people say, look, you're very quick to criticise Prevent, the government, what they're doing, about anti-terrorism, then it's about security. We've seen attacks in London, we've seen attacks in Nice, etc., etc. Clearly, they must have done something wrong if they're going for them.
Well, see, the thing is, problem about this, with all of this, right, is that of course,
it's not playing the devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, it has to be said. It's important, and I'm glad you said it. That the government has a duty to protect its citizens. Absolutely, 100%. It must protect its citizens. So the question has to be, right, 17 years, you've launched war after war after war in name of stopping terrorism. You've expended more than you have expended almost in the Second World War. The amount of ordnance you dropped in Iraq and Afghanistan. It was all to stop terrorism. You told the whole world it's to stop terrorism. You passed law after law after law after law. I mean, during the IRA conflict, 3,000 people died in this country. 3,000. We haven't even had 300 people die in this country, alhamdulillah, as a result of Muslim,
Yes.
And I pray, we don't lose a single
But you don't need to compare for the sake of it, but you're trying to...
So my point is this, right? How come every measure that the government has passed and planned has only made the situation worse? Everything that they have done, the Abu Qatadas, the Abu Hamzas, the Sheikh Faisals, the Omar Bakris, the Anjum Qadris, they're closed down, they're in prison, all of that's happened. You've been involved in drone striking your own citizens who joined IS, right? Everything you've done, how come the situation's worse than it's ever been? So there needs to be a review of policy.
So the war on terror has only created more terror. This idea of...
And it's the longest war in America's history, let alone Britain. I mean, America has been in every war you can imagine, right? And the war on terror has been this perpetual...
Sometimes I think, is it just like a mad child who's about to lose his toys, realizing that his reign is going to be over soon? That, this Anglo-American century, as they say, and the power shifting to the east and to China and Russia, etc., etc. What is it? Is it just a civilizational kind of survival?
I think after the Cold War, and here's another irony, right? Why did the Soviet Union break? It's just the biggest irony I've ever come across. The Soviet Union broke mostly because of the defeat in Afghanistan. They couldn't win.
Right.
The British and the Americans supported the Afghan Mujahideen with Stinger anti-aircraft missiles.
And all the weapons and training.
The training.
Ronald Reagan meeting the Taliban in the White House.
Calling them like the founding fathers of America. Right? There's all that. Some Rambo 3 praise.
Rambo
the
3,
entire film's dedicated to them.
Yeah, it was all right. That was a good word back then, the Mujahideen.
So they never received thanks for breaking the greatest enemy that the Americans ever had, right? Which is Soviet Union. But now, across the board, whether it's in Russia, whether it's in China with the Uyghurs, whether it's in Burma, whether it's in wherever you go, everybody uses the same language. Muslims are terrorists everywhere, even in repressive regimes, as in Egypt, wherever you go, the Assad regime, everybody will use the term terrorist.
Islamic terrorism,
right.
Muslim terrorism, yes.
So there is now this sense of a resurgent, assertive Islam being a global threat.
Yeah.
From whether it's the worst case scenarios like ISIS and the extremism, whether it's somebody who's pretty benign like the Muslim Brotherhood or those kind of people, they're all seen with the same lens. And when they start to do that, it does put us in an us and them situation.
Yeah.
And no matter how hard you try to kind of negate that, the tide is against you.
You're either with us or against us, right? It's like complete madness. I'm not with the ridiculous notion of terror and violence that you are accusing us of or them of.
Yeah.
But nor am I going to be with you in your war, this war that you wage.
It's perpetual war, yeah.
It's just where do you fit in? It's very difficult.
And that's the situation that most people are in.
So Moazzam, what exactly do you do? What's your role with Cage?
Well, some people would say I do very little. Others would say I do too much. My particular role is connected to outreach, and it's mostly universities, media, writing columns for various newspapers, magazines, articles, and so forth. And I'm always seen as the kind of bigger picture guy. I don't get involved in some of the
bigger picture.
The bigger picture guy, yeah. Not the minute. We have our academics, we have our managerial staff who are very good at their job in terms of setting the scene in which direction we're going to go.
You have lawyers, solicitors?
Yeah, we have all of those. We have lawyers who work with the organisation, academics, people who have got experience in various fields. But what's unique about Cage is the clientele. So we're dealing with people on a daily basis, whether it's somebody who's been literally on a rendition flight and sent off to a different part of the world and tortured by the CIA, to a young mother who's had prevent interventions in her home and they've tried to seize her children from them.
Right.
So it's all of that and the above, and people getting stopped at airports and asked questions by the police simply because they can. All of that stuff is part of our kind of day-to-day stuff. We have a great deal of strength and support in the security. Our funding comes solely by donations.
What's donation policy?
Solely from there. We have a staff of around 8 or so people full time, and others, and we have a branch in South Africa, and we have also Cage Nordic, which is connected to the Scandinavian countries.
Okay. What would you say about those that are a bit kind of reserved and hesitant to actually donate to Cage because they're worried about obviously everything that might be involved? You speak a lot about government and surveillance, etc., etc.
We've been called all sorts of things and attacked by
Yes.
all sorts of people, from Boris Johnson to David Cameron and so forth. So I think we in today's world we wear that as a badge of honour, in the sense of we expect if such people's feathers get ruffled, then we might be doing something correct.
Right.
Our supporters in the past have included people like Joanna Lumley, Vanessa Redgrave. We've got so many people who've been
High profile.
And our detractors, as I said, people like that. So, and what we aim to do, our lofty aim, is to have a society free from oppression and injustice. So that's what we're seeking to do.
That's what you stand for.
That's what we stand for. That's what we stand for.
Right. Okay.
And primarily, we are in the business of holding governments to account. And
you're in the firing line, man.
we are.
You know?
We are. And as a result of it, we get fired at and shot at and wounded often.
But from your experience, you think you've gone through so much. I mean, you must have had enough of this, right? To now come back and now here in the UK after being released from Guantánamo, and now you're fighting for the rights of those who, like yourself, have been wrongfully imprisoned, incarcerated.
Yeah, some people think that because we are speaking against what British governments have done, that we're anti-British. But I actually think, in another way, I think it's because we like this country and love this country so much. We've seen it descend into something that we can't recognise, and we're trying to fight for it to come back. Either to be something else that it's never been. You know, I accept that Britain has a sordid history of colonialism and militarism around the world, or to attempt to be something a bit different.
But the land of Magna Carta, eh?
Become the land of Magna Carta. I mean, that's the most, still to this day, it's the most British institution that exists, and the most relevant parts of it today are that no man will be detained without charge or trial, except they'll be judged by a court of their peers. Yet Britain has been involved in holding people without charge or trial and torturing them.
I mean, so you're a strong believer in accountability and holding the government and the authorities and how that be accountable.
Yeah.
Recently there was a case with one of your members, Mohammed Rabbani. He didn't release certain passwords at the airport when he came back to the country.
Yeah.
What happened? Did he get imprisoned? What happened?
So his case is really important. He travelled to the Gulf, was given testimony by an individual who said he'd been tortured very severely at the hands of the Americans. That testimony was confidential. He was travelling with it as a human rights worker. He was stopped at the Schedule 7 airport stop at Heathrow, and they asked him to surrender his password, which had all of the recordings on his device about this, and he was in a dilemma. It's Islamically, it's an amanah, it's a trust. He can't divulge it. As a human rights worker, he can't give it to the same police who may be connected to the government that's been involved in the torture, and he's come here to seek legal redress. How can you do that? So he says to them, please let me speak to my lawyer and see if I can hand over the password to you. and find a way that we can have a third party take a look at it. They refused. They arrested him.
Okay,
and
so
then
he was willing to pass on the
yeah,
parcel,
he
but
was,
by a third
but
party.
a third party, a third independent party, and to take instructions from the client.
Okay.
They refused, and subsequently bailed him to come back to the police station. He came back. He was charged. He was charged under a terrorism offence.
Terrorism
offence. Yeah. He eventually returned back to court. There was a big discussion between the court, and it proved that the police accept that there was no reasonable suspicion at all. They didn't stop him because they were suspecting him of crime. They stopped him just because they could.
Right.
And
abuse of power.
And then the judge eventually, he was found guilty at a magistrate's court, and he was given a fine of about £500-600.
Found guilty of what?
The actual charge is sort of preventing, I forget the exact term, but it's essentially obstructing the police in their ability to do their duty. Right.
Okay.
And the point of this was that Schedule 7 is an abuse of power. Over the past, since its inception in 2000, 500,000 people stopped being Muslims.
So explain very briefly, Schedule 7.
So Schedule 7 is a law under the Terrorism Act 2000 whereby the police can stop you without any reasonable suspicion, any suspicion at all, based upon whatever whim they happen to have. And we found that the number of people being stopped and questioned, initially it was without the presence of a lawyer. You can be held up for 9 hours and questioned about everything. Essentially, it's supposed to be only to do with your travel, but most people don't know their rights, and if the police probe, they can end up asking about everything, and you end up answering about everything. And
just to get you involved even more, right?
And so we've challenged it on many accounts, many levels, and that's been part of our. Again, it's the numbers of people stopped. I think the statistics shows that about 1% or even less have been arrested for any crime out of all of those hundreds of thousands stopped, and even less than 1% of those stopped and arrested have actually been convicted of any crime, and none connected to terrorism.
But this is the problem, under the pretext of national security, all goes, right? Anything's possible.
So it doesn't,
because it's for your safety and our safety.
Right. So on the face of it, it doesn't look so bad. I mean, as I said, we all go around our daily business, and we're not hassled, right?
Because what you're saying, a lot of people who are watching this is, look, I've not experienced this. For example, as a Muslim minority, a British Muslim citizen, I don't have a police knocking on my door.
Yeah.
I have no one threatening to take my kids away. So what you're saying seems a bit too Hollywood.
Yeah. Except for the fact that we are dealing with those, and here's because sometimes we're so separated from those sorts of people, and those sorts of people get ostracized. Mm-hmm. So rarely will you get to hear about it. Now, Schedule 7 is common. Everybody gets Schedule 7. It's very, very common. So you'll know somebody pretty much, or heard of somebody, or if it don't happen to yourself, with Schedule 7.
Right.
With other anti-terror legislation, you'll find that yes, it's not that in comparison to it's not that big. Right. But all of these laws, they begin with people on the edges of society and slowly encroach on everybody else. And that's the stage that we need to start predicting.
So from the peripheral to the centre.
Yeah.
So I imagine you'd say that we, as British citizens, we are having our civil liberties taken away from us daily without us realising it?
They're being slowly but surely. That's what I'm saying. Most people don't know. There's been about 15 or 16 laws passed.
Yes.
And more in the making every year. There's so many bills, even now as we're speaking, that are talking about. One says, there's one that the government recently said, is that the next legislation will be, if you're in a war zone, if you go to a designated area, just the fact that you went there is enough for you to be deemed a terrorist. Right. Now bear that in mind. We've got a lot of Muslims from Pakistan, a lot of Muslims from Yemen, a lot of Muslims from, maybe less so from Syria and those areas, Iraq. But you go to a place, these places are at war or volatile or there's battle, and they deem and designate it, according to secret intelligence, that these regions are conflict, and if you go there, why would you go there as a Briton?
Well, these things are the home, right?
Yeah.
Going back home from any other...
That won't make any difference, because your home is here. So you choose. You choose which is your home. You choose your allegiance. You choose what you're connected to. So this is the next proposal.
The UN Declaration of Human Rights, the freedom to movement, and freedom to travel, and go wherever you like.
All of that is a privilege. If you, in practical application, those freedoms of movements are actually superseded by state national security.
Yeah.
and then it's explained to you that this movement that you're talking about is a privilege. It's not a freedom. It's not a unrestricted freedom. So that's what it's going to come down to, and it's already in the pipeline. So there's a bill in Parliament as we speak being debated about this designated areas. So you travel to Yemen. If it's a designated area, you're a terrorist.
So if people want to know more about this, where can they find this information?
They can go to the CAGE website, cage.ngo.
Okay.
We have events regularly around the country, talks online, and articles, speeches, reports, etc., etc. So you can obviously find out about us in that way. And our social media, Twitter, at CAGE, UK_CAGE, and Facebook.
Facebook is okay. Moazzam, it's been a pleasure. Really appreciate your time. We've had a great kebab together. I never knew that one day I'd meet up with you and just have a doner kebab with you. But anyway, we did. That's life. That's what they say. That's qadr and that's maktoob. Close Shavers, thanks for watching this episode. I hope you've enjoyed as much as I have. Please don't forget to like and share and subscribe, and hopefully we'll have Moazzam on the show once again and we can share some other things together. Take care. Stay safe.
كن كما غيث على الأفياء ماطر صوته يروي قلوبا وخواطر نفعه عم البوادي والحواطر